I'm fairly sure I was supposed to tell him something. I just can't remember what.
Hello, all. I just wanted to say that you are all doing incredible work.
Even me, Mr. McNally.
Yes, even you, Archie. I am aware that I can be a bit curmudgeon-y at times.
A bit?
Bruce?
At times.
Bruce.
Only kidding. Somewhat.
Quite the knee-slapper. Anyhow, I appreciate that you are all doing work to make this show what it is, helping to fulfill my vision wherein the news has integrity, informing people of the facts, looking at statistics and reporting, primarily, with objectivity.
Why are you all looking at me?
I know our audience may be small, but perhaps if we maintain this quality and decorum, it will spread to others. That is how I understand this World Wide Web is supposed to work. Isn't that right, Denberg?
Of course. The algorithm always appreciates the most respectable sorts of content.
Very good. Now I must go and make such a show.
That was, Oh, fiddlesticks.
Hello. I am Jonathan T. McNally, and this is yesterday's news, today. Perhaps the biggest news of the week is that the President of the United States, Donald J. Trump, and First Lady Melania have tested positive for COVID-19. On Saturday, Mr. Trump was taken to Walter Reed Hospital, said to be struggling with a low-grade fever. In-person events have been canceled for the coming weeks, while Hope Hicks, Chris Christie, and Kellyanne Conway have also tested positive. Many within the president's circle have had negative results, including Vice President Mike Pence, Ivanka Trump, and Jared Kushner. A few Republican senators have also contracted the virus, potentially affecting the Supreme Court confirmation we will discuss later in this episode. The announcement of the president's infection had a negative impact on the stock market on Friday. Only time will tell if this uncertainty by investors will continue. We do wish all who have been infected with coronavirus a speedy and complete recovery. Moving on to September 27th. The New York Times released their analysis of 18 years of tax return information. Much of this was obtained through an anonymous source. The Times were able to sift through the admittedly dizzying amount of information and cross-reference this with publicly released data as well as previously leaked returns from 1995 to confirm its factual nature. However, I would like to stress that this particular news desk has not been able to access this hard data, so we are solely relying on the word of the Grey Lady, the Times, a newspaper that has been in circulation since 1851, with 130 Pulitzer Prizes. One of the largest numbers to be revealed through this investigation would have to be the number 7. That is how many years President Trump paid income taxes out of the 18 the Grey Lady investigated. Now, infamously, the year he was elected president, Mr. Trump only paid $750. In this year, he actually provided a considerably higher amount to other countries, including $15,598 to Panama, $145,400 to India, and $156,824 to the Philippines. While at a glance this may all appear a bit untoward, it may be more of a commentary on the United States tax code than the president himself. Donald J. Trump, the businessman, made a multitude of investments in real estate, office buildings, golf courses, etc., many touting his name. Through this web of ventures, he, or perhaps more so, his accounting team, have been able to take the losses of his less fruitful pursuits, i.e. his European golf courses, and apply them to his successful businesses, thereby negating his need to pay taxes on many of his profits. The most eye-catching example would be earnings from his show, The Apprentice, a reality television show in which Mr. Trump fired contestants he deemed unworthy of a seat at the table of one of his businesses. Such contestants included Omarosa Manigault Stallworth and Meat Loaf. The Apprentice franchise garnered the Commander-in-Chief $427.4 million, which he then pumped into poorly performing businesses, thus lessening the amount he was required to contribute to the American people. Since this report by the Times, it has been widely reported that he has $421 million in loans, with $300 million of that coming due during what would become his next term as president. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi has argued that this could put Mr. Trump into a position where foreign influences would attempt to bail him out in exchange for favors. However, these reportedly dire financial straits sound worse than they might truly be. According to financial experts interviewed by the Associated Press, Mr. Trump would only have to sell off a small portion of his property assets to keep current with the aforementioned loans. The examples used by the Associated Press were, quote, an office complex in San Francisco and a Las Vegas tower, which could bring in $500 million alone. All told, the report is quite eye-opening as to the practices taken by the wealthiest in our nation to avoid paying taxes. It does not reveal anything inherently illegal or nefarious, but does show America's most affluent will retain their worth at any cost. We move on to another controversy involving the president and a fair amount of green. But this, some might argue, could be worth even more. The Tongass National Forest in Alaska has been referred to as America's Amazon, as it is the largest national forest in the United States and reportedly absorbs around 8% of the nation's carbon emissions. Much of this area is considered pristine wilderness, having been covered under a Clinton-era protection called the Roadless Rule, prohibiting development. Having worked toward this for nearly 2 years, the Trump administration is lifting this rule, which will open 7 million acres of the 16 million acre forest to logging, construction, and road development. Alaska's Governor Michael Dunleavy and Senator Lisa Murkowski have praised and supported this exemption to the Roadless Rule, saying that protections have stifled the state's economy. Murkowski said that she would also see the space used for mining, renewable energy, and recreation projects. Critics fear this will do massive harm to the local ecosystem, citing damage to streams where salmon spawn. There is also concern that this will encroach on the hunting ground of Alaska's native tribes. This is the latest in a trend of more than 100 environmental regulations that have been rolled back or weakened by the Trump administration.
All right. Can we please punch this up a bit?
Pardon me. Who might you be?
Oh, good. This again.
Remember, we told you about her.
No, Archie, I am most certain that you did not.
Oh, that's what it was. Apologies, Jonathan. It may have slipped my mind. Like most things I'd say, Bruce. Hey, you didn't say anything either.
Well, this is insufferable. Jonathan, I'm the woman who's supposed to make this strange little news show happen, or preferably to become profitable.
Oh, that's you.
That is what I just said. The name is Scarlett. Scarlett Murdoch.
Murdoch?
No relation. Now let's make this a bit less dry. You somehow managed to make a story about an influx of burly lumberjacks sound boring.
Scarlett, that's not exactly what's happening there.
Obviously. Our first order of business might be finding you a sense of humor.
Folks do not come to me for jokes and nonsense. They come to me for the facts, and that is what I intend to report.
So you always say. But the fact is, people aren't coming to you at all. Did you happen to hear about Shepard Smith?
Shep Smith.
Of course you did. It's been almost a year since he left Fox News, and now his return to the news desk is dominating headlines. His new show on CNBC broke down many of the things you often discuss. Wildfires, coronavirus, the election, and he was praised all across social media for his unique take on the news. And do you know what that take is, Jonathan?
Do tell.
He says it is not his job to express his opinion. He is telling just the facts.
That is highway robbery. I was doing that first.
Yes, but you lack the brand recognition that old Shep has, and frankly, the personality. The only thing you all have going for you is that you sound like you stepped out of a community theater production of Disney's Newsies.
Hold it right there. I resent that.
It's a fun gimmick, I suppose, but you're going to have to do better than that if you want this show to be heard by more than the small circle of your rather limited acquaintances.
So, what do you propose we do?
I was hoping at least one of you had come up with something by now.
We live-chirped the presidential debate the other night.
Live-chirped? That could be a start. How'd it go?
Well, I hated it.
Really? You seem to enjoy yourself.
Maybe by the end, there's something about shouting my unfiltered thoughts into my telephone while listening to the cacophony of three men trying to one-up each other's barely bridled fury.
So, this helped to increase the audience then?
Scarlett, we gained 3 new followers on our Twitter.
So, no. I figured as much. Alright. You can carry on with the show, but I will be around more often, unfortunately. Taking a more active role so things run a bit more lucratively. Jonathan, what is up next?
I thought we'd cover some updates to past stories.
No. We're going to have you do Tuesday's debate instead.
But, Scarlett...
Great. That's decided. And I will be seeing you all again very soon.
Right. So, it appears that we are covering the debate now. I was rather hoping to simply direct the audience toward our live-chirped comments.
At Radio YNT.
Yes, Denberg, thank you. Perhaps you can take this one, Bruce?
But I'm the entertainment reporter. You never let me cover politics.
I fear what happened on Tuesday was more akin to entertainment than anything else.
You're not wrong, my friend. If you listen to any coverage following the debate, it would say mostly the same. I will get into some of the finer points now, if you can call them that. It was so very difficult to keep track of policies discussed with the insults being hurled and the grown men trying to shout over one another. But this is what little could be gleaned from their dueling diatribe. As to healthcare, especially in the wake of COVID-19, former Vice President Joe Biden cited the staggering number of dead and infected from the virus. President Donald Trump countered that Mr. Biden would have gotten more people killed. Biden called Trump a liar, and ad hominem attacks ensued. The president's strongest section was concerning the economy. Mr. Trump spoke to its strength despite the effects of coronavirus, and Mr. Biden countered with the aforementioned New York Times story about his avoided taxes. Mr. Biden's strongest topic was regarding climate change, wherein Mr. Trump would only partially agree to the effects of greenhouse gases on warming the planet. Joe Biden gave the closest thing to actual policy and statistics the whole night when mentioning how he wants to tackle the issue. Another key moment came when the president was asked if he rebuked white supremacist groups like the Proud Boys. His response was that they should stand back and stand by. Many have taken this as less a condemnation and perhaps more so a rallying cry. Regardless of how it was intended, the implications are no less disturbing. It is almost cliched to say at this point, but when asked who the winner of the night was, it most certainly was not the American people. This so-called debate devolved into utter nonsense. Many have laid blame at the feet of moderator Chris Wallace, but this is most certainly misplaced. The man kept his composure as best anyone could, and the fact that he wrangled control at all was truly a Herculean feat. No. The blame is with our political institutions. This night informed U.S. citizens as to nothing but the true state of the union. A supposed evening of policy discussion had a former vice president lobbing childish insults like fool, clown, liar, Putin's puppy, and the worst president America has ever had. What was once a civil debate on ideals had the President of the United States attacking the character of a man's son who had recovered from drug addiction. The debate was broadcast not just here, but worldwide. Other countries have seen that this is who we selected to lead us. One of these two men will be our commander-in-chief. I can only hope that they graduate from schoolyard bullying when they are representing us on the world stage. And back to you, Jonathan.
Thank you, Bruce. I found myself rather aghast at the proceedings that evening, so I appreciate your input. Now, here is Denberg with a word from what most certainly are not our sponsors.
As we near election time, the great decision of 2020, staying informed may be more important than ever. One such source of information should, of course, be yesterday's News Today, broadcasting to you each and every Monday. But it should not be the only source. For that matter, you should never get your news from only one place. Just like you cannot, or rather should not, rely on only one food group for sustenance, you have to consume a vast media diet to truly become knowledgeable on the candidates and issues. So as November 3rd approaches, open your mind, expand your search, and gain a greater understanding for all that is happening, as your vote will shape how everything changes going forward.
Thank you, Denberg. Now, I think I might get to those updates to our ongoing stories. Our first is regarding our ongoing coverage of alleged human rights violations against Uyghur Muslims in Xinjiang. Last Wednesday, the U.S. House of Representatives approved legislation that would bar imports from Xinjiang unless they were proven not to have used forced labor. The United States, the European Union, and other Western powers have been highly critical of China's practices in the region that are reported to include mass incarceration, indoctrination, and potential genocide. At a conference last weekend, Chinese leader Xi Jinping disregarded these condemnations, calling the nation's effort in Xinjiang a success. He made it clear that there are no plans to soften such policies, stating that the strategy regarding Muslim populations must be held for the long term. He further defended against accusations of indoctrination, saying that the Chinese Communist Party is helping to, quote, make a shared awareness of Chinese nationhood take root deep in the soul, end quote. Next, in the western U.S., wildfires continue to take their toll after cooler temperatures and rains offered a slight respite for some regions. Counties in Northern California were struck by wind-fueled inferno this past week. Tens of thousands were evacuated and at least 3 killed. More than 100 buildings have been confirmed destroyed, including homes and winery installations. The devastation to wine country has been considerable, greatly affecting an industry valued at $70 billion. Meanwhile, in Oregon, 200 miles of highways were reopened after having been closed for a month due to the massive fires. Along these roads, heavy rains remained a concern where hillsides may have been destabilized, and rock slides could result. An estimated 480,500 trees may need to be removed from the region, and 47 miles of highway remain closed. A different sort of firestorm was diverted as a ruling by a federal judge blocked the U.S. government's ban on downloads of the TikTok application. This ruling came only a few hours before the policy was set to take effect. The company has criticized the ban as unconstitutional and a violation of due process. The president has tentatively approved an agreement between TikTok, ByteDance, Oracle, and Walmart, which would give the American companies partial ownership of the app. This deal has not been finalized, but Mr. Trump has indicated that it would address his national security concerns. And thus we move on to...
Strangely true local news.
Yes, thank you. We begin in Ireland, where the sandwich company Subway received a ruling that may be difficult to stomach. On Tuesday, a franchisee was claiming their bread was a staple food subject to a 0% rate. Unfortunately, the country's Supreme Court ruled they were ineligible as Subway's bread contains too much sugar to be considered for this category. In reaction, a spokesperson for Subway said in a statement to CNN, quote, Subway's bread is, of course, bread, end quote. Over in England, Billy, Eric, Tyson, Jade, and Elsie received a different kind of admonishment. They are among a colony of 200 gray parrots at Lincolnshire Wildlife Center, and they picked up a rather bad habit. The feathered five found fun fluttering forth with foul phrases, rather rude remarks that I really can't relay. No visitors complained about the swearing parrots. Most instead found it was entertaining. Nonetheless, the park has broken up the troublesome lot in hopes that they will learn some less offensive calls. And finally, another message is being criticized for supposed vulgarity, but the creator simply thinks it has been creative and effective. Angela Barnes of Atlanta, Georgia, directed a public service announcement in the form of a music video called "Get Your, Booty to the Pole." Critics take issue with the featured exotic dancers, but the message has been shared widely across the World Wide Web. On top of encouraging everyone to go out and vote, it also expresses the importance of down-ballot candidates and issues. And now for our final story. Last week, we discussed the passing of the influential figure that was Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg. This week, we must discuss the all-out political brawl for her seat on the bench that started just after her passing and continues to this very moment. Last weekend, Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg became the first woman in U.S. history to lie in state at the U.S. Capitol for her long service to the country and for being a pioneer for women's rights. As the president stood over her flag-draped coffin to pay his respects, he was heckled with calls to honor her wish. That wish was that she not be replaced until a new president is installed. On September 26th, President Trump nominated Judge Amy Coney Barrett for the Supreme Court. At 48 years old, she would be the youngest member and could shape the court for decades to come. She is a native of New Orleans and graduated law school at Notre Dame, where she also taught law for 15 years. At her nomination, she acknowledged the work of Ruth Bader Ginsburg for the barriers that she toppled, which allowed Barrett to be considered today. Those on the left are very concerned that she would help sway the Supreme Court far to the right. Barrett has been very careful with her comments regarding how she will decide cases in the future, saying that she will follow precedent, and also that it is not the duty of the courts to push legislative change. Her record and past statements paint a somewhat different picture. The topic she has been most outspoken on is abortion. At the University of Notre Dame, she was a member of Faculty for Life, and also penned a letter to Catholic bishops in 2015 that affirmed the value of human life from conception to natural death. With other such statements and rulings in previous cases, critics believe she intends to work against Roe v. Wade, especially with her saying that some precedents are more worthy of respect than others. Legal experts believe that she will likely not hear a direct challenge to Roe v. Wade, but will consider cases that could slowly chip away at abortion rights. She also has a history of standing up for gun rights. In one such case, she cited gun rules from the 18th and 19th century. This comes from ideals learned under Justice Scalia. She was his law clerk in 1998 and 1999, and holds his belief in originalism that the Constitution should be upheld according to its original meaning. Critics say this can lead to outdated interpretations of modern issues. Perhaps nothing is of more concern than the Affordable Care Act, which will go before the court on November 10th, of which Barrett was critical of a previous court ruling to uphold it. Republicans are currently rushing to confirm this nomination, possibly even just days before November's election, while Democrats aim to hinder this at all costs. Indeed, within hours of Ruth Bader Ginsburg's death, Republican Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell announced that the president's then unnamed nominee would get a vote, and Democrat Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer responded with, "The American people should have a voice in this election." This was in fact a quote of Mr. McConnell's from 2016. At the time, President Barack Obama was attempting to fill the seat of the then recently passed Justice Antonin Scalia. Republicans blocked this effort, saying confirming a justice nomination in an election year would break historic precedent. These sentiments were supported by many in the Grand Old Party, including Senators Lindsey Graham, Chuck Grassley, and Ted Cruz, all of whom now back moving ahead with a new justice just weeks before a presidential election. Even President Trump told Politico in 2016 that he thought they should, quote, let the next president pick. And Democrats, of course, now expect them to uphold the precedent from 2016, now contrary to their statements at the time. The only tool Democrat Senator Schumer has at present amounts to delaying tactics. They may slow down legislative business, which would have the added effect of recalling senators for votes, removing them from the campaign trail. There have been further calls for abolishing the filibuster, and possibly adding further justices to the Supreme Court, something candidate Biden avoided commenting on at Tuesday's debate. But he has said previously that packing the court now would only lead to this tactic being implemented and misused by both sides any time there is a disagreement. This battle is far from over. And politicians on the right and the left may be doing harm to not only their party image, but to the very nature of the institutions that they represent. Contradictions and underhanded tactics by both sides are calling into question the legitimacy of the courts, and at its core, our democracy. Perhaps former President Barack Obama said it best. A basic principle of the law, and of everyday fairness, is that we apply rules with consistency and not based on what's convenient or advantageous in the moment. Squabbling and disagreements in politics are nothing new, but the way in which politicians handle them have. Whether this recent struggle or the debate Bruce described earlier, we are certainly seeing a different era of discourse taking place. All I can say as we continue through this unique time is to continue to educate yourself on the facts and not the hearsay. It is more important now than ever to become involved in the political process and find representatives who are truly fit to be called leaders. If you have not yet, I encourage you to register to vote. We have included information in the associated description to help with that process. And if you have already done that, please vote when the time comes on or before November 3rd. And even after the dust settles from that great national decision, continue to stay involved in the process. Your participation is paramount. Otherwise, it will continue on this way, and all you'll be able to say is that it is what it is. Thank you, and good night.
This program was written and performed by Roger J. Thatcher and Dennis Schenneberg. You are encouraged to obtain a subscription to this broadcast with the simple selection of a button below. Furthermore, you can indicate your appreciation by giving us the old thumbs up. Did you have any thoughts about any of our stories? Please comment them below. Or to read those of our newsmen, tune your Twitter to @RadioYNT. And as always, be sure to tune in next week to hear tomorrow's news of yesterday. Then